So you apply for Drag Race, you get on the second season. Had you watched the first season?
Of course I had. Yeah,
What was
it
your
was funny.
opinion?
I loved it. Honestly, like so many people have had disappointments with the season, and I totally understand that. And I have probably a lot of the same disappointments that they might have as well. But honestly, the fact that it existed and it was there, and that like my community, well, not exactly my community, and I'll tell you why, but my community was like represented. It was just exciting for me because for so long, Drag Race was telling the American story or the British story, and finally, like Down Under got to be represented. So it was just really exciting, to be honest. I remember the very first episode came out, and I was about to do a gig, and I like watched the whole thing, and I was like, I have to do I have to do this. Like, let's go. But I didn't get approached for the first season. Um, but a bunch of my like drag sisters in Brisbane did. Obviously, none of us got on. And then so when the second season rolled around, I think a lot of them were expecting it to be one of them.
Hmm.
So when I got the call, everyone was like, "Who the fuck is this bitch? Like, what the fuck?" Like, I don't think I was expected out of everyone in my community. I don't think I was expected to be the one to represent. But so yeah, it I think it ruffled some feathers and confused some people. But at the end of the day, like I've championed Brisbane like as much as I can with this show because I truly love my city so much. We're a really strong community, and like just it was great to get to bring a bit of Brisbane to Drag Race. Like what a special treat, right? Like so cool.
Yeah. And you walked into the workroom and you made a big entrance. I mean, you you said giddy up, motherfucker, and then you had a fucking whip.
Giddy up, motherfucker.
I have to know, are you familiar with the whip or did you learn the whip just for this?
No, well, I had performed with whips before. As I started like drag, I learned about drag first essentially. But the more I did drag, the more I found myself getting booked for gigs with burlesque performers or sideshow performers. And I found that like drag's great, but I can learn only so much from fellow drag queens because then it gets to the point where like every drag queen is the same, and like that conversation's starting to be had, which is there too much drag? Is it oversaturated? Are we all just referencing each other at this point? Because so many drag queens start and they're like, I want to be like the drag queen on TV. And I was sort of one of those queens. I don't think it's an issue. Anyway, I met all these burlesque and sideshow performers, and they were the people that I like to think that I cut my teeth that way. Like I learned burlesque and I learned how to crack a whip. I learned how to eat fire. And it was just because they were like, this drag queen she's got an open mind. She loves what she does. So yeah. And I was like, let's bring it to Drag Race. No one else has done it. Cool.
I was so nervous. I was like, you're going to hit somebody. Oh my gosh, can you just imagine Spanky Jackson's going to get hit by your whip?
Well, I was so nervous. I was worried that when I cracked it, there wasn't going to, because as we know, the workroom in Australia is quite small, well, the Down Under one. And I actually before I went in, I asked the production people for like the measurements. So in my like hotel room, I like marked the measurements on the wall with my tape measure. And I was cracking my whip in my hotel room just to see if I would hit the sides. And I did not hit the sides. So I walked into that workroom confidently and just went for it.
Can you imagine if you walked in and it was much smaller of a workroom than what you imagined and you were like, oh no, now I have to hit the wall.
I know, my biggest nightmare, I was like, if I'm the queen that is confident enough to rock up and crack a whip and it like hits the wall and doesn't crack, I'm going to get that like awkward, like trying too hard queen edit and it'll be just so shit. So I'm so grateful that I cracked it. Yeah, just had to do it once because, I don't know, Faux screamed very loudly, earth-shattering screams from Faux Fur. But yeah, if I did it anymore, I don't think it would have had the same like effect.
Yeah. Well, Faux Fur was the one who had the issue with the entrance room with her hat kept falling down. So
yeah. Oh my God. So they were telling me about it. Like, we finished sort of the first day, and they were talking about the entrances because not everyone gets to see it, and I didn't see Faux. And Faux was like, "Oh, my hat fell down," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm sure it won't be that bad." And she was like, "I got to redo it, so I don't think they'll air the version where my hat fell down." And I was looking at her and I'm like, oh, yeah, they won't. And in my head, I'm like, they're going to air it, you stupid bitch. Like, they're so going to air that. Like,
So you are on the show, you are tracking along, and there were a lot of moments with you that I kind of related to on some level, but also I felt that I was a little confused by what was happening in the workroom.
Mm.
You did have a confrontation with Queen Kong, and you said, I've never seen Queen Kong like this. Usually she's the beautiful maternal figure, and this week she's a cunt. So
Mm.
I would love to know from you, had you known Queen before then, and then like you get into the workroom and it's a totally different person? Like what was the moment and everything that you were noticing?
Well, I hadn't known Queen Kong very well, but we'd worked together before. Queen's is like one of the most successful queens, especially before the show. She was, traveling around Australia, even around the world, doing circus acts and drag, and everyone sort of has met Queen Kong at least once or twice. And we kept in contact online, and we sort of figured out that we might be seeing each other.
Yeah.
We worked together a couple months before we went away, and I kind of gave her the look of like, what are you getting up to in January? She's like, oh, not much, girl. What are you doing? We figured each other out. But and she's always been lovely. And she's always been that person that everyone talks about, which is like Mama Kong or things like that. But ultimately, like, I think the one thing that I do regret is like putting that expectation for her to still be like that in a completely different environment. Like, I definitely like would have loved to have like sort of had a friend there, but at the end of the day, she's there to compete just as much as I was.
Yeah.
So I think it was unfair for me to like put that expectation on there that like, oh, like if we're competing, but you still got to be nice to me. And the truth is, she doesn't have to. Like I've had a few people talk to me about, like, I had a few of my friends, and especially Queens of Color, like be like, hey girl, like I think what you did was a microaggression. And in my head, I'm like, I'm not a racist. Like, there can't be.
Yeah.
But the more that we spoke about it and I learned about it, I was like, oh, well, that makes total sense, because I wouldn't have probably put that expectation on someone else. So as much as it sucked to have had to like go through that experience on TV, the truth is that I've got to make that mistake so many other people can like learn for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was more important for me to show that than it was for me to like win the fight. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad that you had that moment with your friends and that your friends could even tell you that, like, because
that's why I'm with their friends. They call my shit.
Yeah. And you took it well, so that's good too. I think that a lot of times we can come from places, just like you said, at first you were like, wait, I'm not racist, or I'm not this and that, but there are things that are coherently like put into our heads as young children, or if we are around things and we get so used to certain cultures and ethnicities around us that we don't necessarily look at what is in front of our face. And I think that is exactly kind of like what happened there. But I would like to know, did the fandom react negatively, positively? Like, what was that like after that moment?
Gosh, it was so mixed. Like, Kong and I both probably got the same amount of love and hate from different people. Like, I had people tagging, and I don't know, Drag Race fans, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you, but you do not need to tag our like Instagrams in your shitty opinions. We don't care. But like they tag us. It's so weird.
It's so
like,
mean.
The whole show they'll tag us like, at Beverly Kills, you're a horrible cunt and I hope you die. And then the next one will be like, at Queen Kong, you were a horrible person at Beverly Kills. You should be ashamed. And I'm like, leave us alone. But we probably got the same amount, to be honest. Like, people would come to Kong's defense, they'd come to my defense. And at the end of the day, like, Kong and I, that was like, 8 months prior, and we've done like so many gigs together. We've hung out. We're friends now. So it's like, it's kind of funny that it kind of like, you have to sort of relive it. And we were kind of like, we just checked in with each other, like, you're right. And she's like, yeah, I'm good. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. It was just really funny to like relive those moments like so long after the fact. It was very strange. But at the end of the day, like, the entire cast and crew, like, we all work together. We all get along. We were all at my nightclub last night getting very drunk. And it was great.